The movie opens with an intensely somber mood. A family is seen walking through the grounds with a priest as rain splatters all around. The scene quickly shifts to a boy dragging a coffin to bury it while his mother supervises the entire ordeal. The movie is broken into 3 parts. The first part is titled, "Neither the Father Dies, Nor We Have Lunch." The story of the family that we follow remains unnamed. We follow the father who's cleaning his gun. Seeing his elder son, whom we are going to refer to as Son 1, he flexes his gun in an attempt to scare him. He mentions to his wife in a sarcastic tone that she has brought up a piece of trash. In the background, a baby is crying incessantly. Later that night, the father goes to the pigsty to check up on the pigs. While he behaves extremely weirdly around the pigs, he turns up the radio. Suddenly, he rushes back in and drags Son 1 outside to the pigsty while the other 2 siblings witness the mistreatment from their bedroom window. The father orders Son 1 to look after the pigs and teach something to his little siblings. That night, he has a dream where he's in the middle of the forest. He can hear the disturbing snorts of the pigs while his head spins. He wakes up in the middle of nowhere in only his underwear. The next morning, the father acts poorly with the son again. Although his mother is aware of the treatment, she doesn't protest anything. All she does is pray incessantly to God. At the breakfast table, the other 2 siblings comment fiercely that Son 1 is not their brother. The sister spitefully spits that their father doesn't like him. Yeah, like he doesn't know that already. In the evening, the 2 siblings are playing outside, and it's not a normal kids game. They are seen ripping off feathers from a dead animal and collecting them. Inside the house, the mother continues to pray whilst the little baby coos in the bed. Her idiotic and creepy husband barges in to hinder her prayers. She firmly asks him to get out when he claims that there's no Lord. The entire family is unhinged and it keeps getting worse. The mother goes to the church where the priest preaches that the city is reigned by Satan. He's the one who destroys their crops and needs to be stopped by not resorting to promiscuity and hatred. After the mass, while the other leaves, the mother stays back in the church. Later that night, Son 1 is suddenly attacked by 3 people whose faces are hidden by masks and dragged into a big shed full of hunting weapons. Their attacks don't stop for a while, but when another man in a mask barges in, they stop and demand the money that they were promised. As it turns out, the man is his father. According to him, he has kidnapped him to teach him a way to survive. He reveals that the meat he had been eating all this while is human meat. Now it's his turn to bring real food into the house. He brings a boy who's bound on a chair. His face is hidden by a mask yet again. The father forces Son 1 to kill him. He concludes that the boy who's gagged has been stealing crops, thus branding him as Satan. He produces a knife which he had been using to murder people and bring their meat to have a good meal every day. When the face of the boy is revealed, it turns out to be Son 1's friend. Somewhere in the dark, the 3 kids distribute the money among themselves. We see the other 2 siblings with another girl. While the siblings leave, the girl goes back and witnesses the father, forcibly encouraging Son 1 to stab the bound boy. He brings the 2 boys close to each other and makes him grab the knife, ultimately stabbing the boy. While Son 1 sobs after the experience, the father smears a cross on his forehead with the blood, taking the Lord's name. He returns home and informs his wife that he has baptized his son. His wife loses her mind completely and hits her husband repeatedly, yelling that she hates him. His husband takes pleasure in that anger. Later, she mumbles prayers to God repeatedly to beg for forgiveness. That night, the son has strange dreams about pigs and his traumatizing father yet again. He wakes up with a fever while his mother tries to bring his temperature down. The siblings look at them in disgust. The next day, the mother finally had enough. She drags the siblings to the church and begs the priest to take them away from their father. Time's running out. The priest accepts the request and does as he's told. Back at the house, the mother acts crazier. She tells the son that he has sinned and angered God. To rid him of his sins, he has to murder Satan and feed the defective meat to the pigs. Upon his resistance, she forces him to comply with her order for salvation. That night, her husband returns home drunk. When the wife brings him food, he drunkenly asks her to come to him. She asks him to thank the Lord for the food first, to which he arrogantly slurs that the only God in the house is him. Well, behold Satan. On cue, he is ferociously stabbed from behind by Son 1. He launches on him and repeatedly stabs him while his mother looks at the scene in pure tranquility. Together, the mother and son drag the corpse away. The next day, they have the father's funeral, tying it with the first scene of the movie. This ends part 1. The next part is titled No One Eats Before Mommy Prays. It follows the changing relationship between son 1 and his obsessively religious mother. We see son 1 return home. Immediately after his return, his mother curses him for not bringing home any food, calling him useless. She repeatedly mentions her attempts to help him which haven't been of any use. In his sleep, he sees disturbing visions of butchered meat and people with masks of meat. He wakes up with a jolt and goes to his mother. His mother is having breakfast and is, of course, still complaining about him. When he reaches for a plate, she rebukes him and states that there's no food for him. She keeps complaining about the meat that she's eating and how she can't have it anymore. Later, son 1 eats his mother's leftovers when his mother comes again to remind him that he's useless and will pay for his sins. Then he goes to a prostitute that he had been visiting. He angers her when he asks about the number of men who had slept with her. She yells at him in obvious anger and he leaves. As he's leaving, she asks him if he's going home to sleep with his mother. That day, he murders a man and brings his meat for his mother. At the dinner table, his mother seems to be in a good mood and thanks the Lord for the food. She keeps talking constantly and flips out on him when he interrupts her. She also states that she knows the woman he had been seeing, calling her Mary Magdalene, and asks him to bring her. Later that night, he's again haunted by his nightmare. He sees his mother, his creepy sister, and meat. A lot of meat. He wakes up in the middle of a barren field. Back at the prostitute center, he has a panic attack in his sleep. He sees the eerie vision yet again while his lover tries to wake him up. She cuddles up to him, trying to bring him back to the real world. When she succeeds, she comforts him. The next day, he hears his mother and lover at the dining table. His lover is pregnant and his mother is showing her children's clothes. He gets increasingly agitated and disgusted at the prospect of the unborn child. The scene quickly shifts to one of utmost horror. He is sitting in between the corpses of his mother and lover with the unborn child on the dining table. He tells his mother's corpse that he has brought food. Now he will be the one to talk. He feeds on his unborn child with silent cruelty. He also makes his wife's corpse eat the meat, then puts the meat in his mother's mouth too. He tells them that they shouldn't eat before praying, throwing his mother's words back at her. As he finishes his dinner, we see another vision of a man covered in blood, wearing a mask made out of pig's meat. He does the sign for the Trinity, bringing the second part to an end. The third and last part is named the Holy Family. Now we follow the son, who's all alone now. Quite some time has passed since his mother's death, and he's now slowly moving towards complete insanity. He is a murderer who collects the meat of their victims for a happy meal at home. He stalks people to find his perfect victim. Thus, he has the real food his father had always mentioned. He has ultimately become his father, Satan. At night, he sleeps with his mother's rotting corpse and narrates to her the events of his day. He kisses her rotten body to establish that he still loves her. It's him and his mother's corpse against the world. His house is infested with maggots and bugs. Amidst the rot and smell of death, he's preparing food for himself and his supposed darling, to whom he talks about how difficult it is to get real food. He proceeds to speak some crap about how true love doesn't exist anymore. Thus, the name of the Lord is also being drugged. But according to him, their love isn't like that. Their love is true and real, and his darling is a woman bound and gagged in a chair. Her face is covered by a mask made of flesh. True love, indeed. He removes the mask and the cloth around her mouth. She screams and protests, asking him to let her go. Instead, he sings for her and asks if his mother has said anything bad to her again. He screams at the corpse, affirming that this is the woman he loves, and she's different from all the others. The man maniacally forces himself on her and begs her to warm him. He makes her sleep next to his mother's corpse. When she wakes up, she screams in terror. The next day, he spots a woman, and it seems obvious that he wants her to be his prey. Back at home, he sleeps between the kidnapped woman whose name is Rosalita and his mother. Thus, he completes his holy family. Still, now he's plagued by the vision of his terrifying mother and a man in a pig's mask, flesh all around. Even after her death, he can still hear her. He sits still as his mother spits obscenities at him. That day, he spots the woman he had seen earlier and chases her. A tense hunt ensues. Although she almost escapes, he finds her behind a car. He kills her and takes her meat home. In the house, Rosalita is nowhere to be seen. Frustrated, he breaks the mirror and shouts at his mother's corpse. He frantically screams that he hates his mother and burns her corpse to curb the cold he has been feeling throughout. As his mother's corpse burns, he sits there shivering while clutching a knife. The movie ends with his dead body lying limp in the lap of the person we've seen all along, the man with a mask made of flesh. A voice states that God is a liar. A maniac laugh is heard as the story of the son of Satan finally comes to an end.